On today's Locked On Giants podcast, who are the top most important Giants on the team? That plus what is the key to unlocking the success of Daniel Jones at quarterback? And what would success look like for the team in 2024? That's coming your way next on the Locked On Giants podcast.
You are Locked On Giants, your daily New York Giants podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Today's episode of the Locked On Giants podcast is brought to you by GameTime. Download the GameTime app, create an account, and use the promo code LOCKEDONNFL for $20 off your first purchase. Last-minute tickets, lowest prices guaranteed. Hello, New York Giant fans, and welcome to another edition of the Locked On Giants podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast family, your team every day. I'm your host, Patricia Traina, credential member of the New York Giants media for Locked On, as well as for the Giants fan team site over on si.com/NFL/Giants, part of the Fan Nation Network on si.com. And a welcome on into my Blue Crew community members, to my everydayers, and of course, my newcomers and everybody in between. Thank you for spending part of your day with us here on the Locked On Giants podcast. It is appreciated. And on today's show, we're going to kick things off with a look at the top most important Giants on this year's roster. Now, I went and I ranked them based on a number of criteria, which I'll get into in just a moment. You guys may or may not agree with it, and that's fine. So I'm always curious to hear what you guys have to say about anything when it comes to a ranking and whatnot. Then we're going to take a look at how the Giants need to unlock Daniel Jones's potential. There's something that they really haven't been doing a whole lot of that I think they're going to this year, and they should have been doing all along. But of course, we'll see if that's what happens. But I'll tell you what that is and why I think it will make a difference. That'll be in segment 2. And then in segment 3, a lot of you have asked me, what would a successful season look like for the New York Giants? Well, I've got 5 criteria that I listed that I think would indicate that the team is headed in the right direction, beyond, of course, obviously, the wins and the losses. So that is our agenda today. Again, welcome on into everyone. Let's get started. All right. Let's talk about the top most important players to the New York Giants' success this season. Now, this is always a difficult exercise for me because the criteria I use is, can the guy be replaced if, God forbid, he gets injured? How key is he to the success of the offense or the defense? And moreover, is he a piece of the foundation moving forward? Now, some of you are going to sit there and say, wow, when you hear this list and some of the names I have on it, but hear me out. And again, if you're watching on YouTube, you can drop a comment and let me know what you think. If you're listening on our audio platforms, you can always send me an email and let me know what you think. All right, so let's kick this off. I'm going to go in reverse order here. I'm going to go from I don't want to say least important to most important, but I've kind of ranked them in a loose order here. So I'm going to kick things off with inside linebacker Bobby Okereke. Bobby Okereke is a guy who last year was on the field for every single snap. He was solid in coverage. He was solid against the run. Team co-captain. You know, you look at what the Giants have behind him in terms of depth. I don't know necessarily that they have somebody who can replace him if, God forbid, he has to miss time. So I think Bobby Okereke is not only a foundation piece, but a guy that is probably irreplaceable at this juncture in time. All right. After Bobby O, brace yourself, Giant fans. I have quarterback Daniel Jones. Yeah, that's right. Y'all have said to me, Pat, you're always ragging on Daniel Jones. No, I'm not ragging on Daniel Jones, folks. My concern with Daniel Jones has always been his health history. But that doesn't mean I don't want the guy to succeed, because if he succeeds, the team succeeds, and my job then becomes a heck of a lot easier. So anyway, looking at where things stand right now with the quarterback situation, Daniel Jones when healthy, does give the Giants their best chance to win. Is he irreplaceable? At this juncture, you can make that argument depending on what happens with Drew Lock, depending what happens with Tommy DeVito and his development. But Daniel Jones, of the 4 quarterbacks on the roster. I didn't mention Nathan Rourke, who I haven't really seen yet, so I didn't factor him into this equation. But Daniel Jones does give the Giants the best chance to win. And some of you have asked me, well, then why were you beating the drum for the Giants to replace him? I was beating the drum because of the injury concerns I have. Now, obviously, the Giants, their medical staff knows what they're doing. Even though some of you out there have written and said, oh, the medical staff needs to be replaced and whatnot, they are still one of, if not the best medical staffs in the NFL. So if they clear Daniel Jones and they're not worried about it, I'm not going to sweat it. I'll just roll with the punches and just see how it works out and hope for the best. Because as I've said many times before, the Giants win, my life, my job is a lot easier as opposed to a losing season. But I do think right now, Daniel Jones is a part of that foundation, not a solidified part, because I can't, dismiss the fact that the Giants were looking to trade up to get Drake May, which, to me spoke volumes, but they didn't get him. They also didn't panic and say, oh my God, we've got to replace him one way or another, to where they reach for a quarterback. So it's ride or die with Daniel Jones. I've accepted it. Good luck. Let's see how it rolls. Hopefully it'll be, a positive outcome for the Giants. All right. Next up on my list of most important Giants, Malik Neighbors. The Giants finally have themselves a number one receiver. Finally. No disrespect to Darius Slayton or Jalen Hyatt or Wan'Dale Robinson, the guys who were on the roster last year. But Malik Neighbors is going to do wonders for this team. And, look, last year, the Giants tried to make it work with Darren Waller as their tight end. They saw him as kind of a pseudo number one receiver. That did not work. So now they've got themselves a legitimate speedster, a guy who could take the top off of the defense, a guy who can pick up yards after the catch, and Malik Neighbors. And I think if he's not in the lineup, and I'm saying this having not seen him practice, with the Giants, which, we'll see on Thursday when the media is allowed into the OTA, I think Malik Neighbors is a very key piece of this roster moving forward. All right. Next up, I have cornerback Deonte Banks. I am still a little bit concerned about the cornerback situation for the Giants. Now, Deonte Banks, I'm not worried about, him. I think he is, a cornerstone piece. He is a guy who is probably their best cornerback right now. Cornerback 2, it looks like it's going to be Cordell Flott, but Flott is going to have to win that job. And if he doesn't, then what? I'd like to see some guys emerge at the cornerback position, because if, God forbid, again, Deonte Banks has to miss time, what do? That's where I have some concerns about, the cornerback position and the state of the cornerback position. But the good news is they have Jerome Henderson, who's a very, very good defensive backs coach, former cornerback in the NFL. And if anybody could get the most out of these guys, it's Jerome Henderson. All right, next up, I'm going to go with the duo of Kayvon Thibodeau and Brian Burns. I have those two together. I've been screaming for a number of years for the Giants to get at least 2 solid pass rushers. And, they also have Dexter Lawrence, obviously, who I'll talk about in just a moment, spoiler alert, but they finally have themselves the Batman and Robin. And I know some of you said, no, it's Black Panther and Spider-Man. I'm old-fashioned, folks. I remember Batman and Robin, hence why I keep going back to that duo. So anyway, to me, Burns and Thibodeau, cornerstones for sure. I think if either one of those guys is out of the lineup, I question what they would do. Would they plug in Azeez Ojulari, who has had trouble staying healthy, and how effective would he be? Ernie Accorsi, back in the day, the former general manager, used to say you can never have too many pass rushers. I still don't know that the Giants have enough pass rushers, but Let's just hope that what they have stays healthy. All right. Next up, Dexter Lawrence. All right. The guy's a stud. By the way, I'm going in reverse order here. So Dexter Lawrence would be number 2 on my list here. The guy is a stud. Dexter Lawrence, sexy Dexy. I mean, come on. This one, do I really need to explain this one? He is probably right now the Giants' best player on defense, a guy who can rush the passer, who's good against the run. They lose him, and, I'd worry because, although the Giants have some young depth at the defensive line position, I hope that some of this young depth really develops to where, they have backups and options because, Dexter Lawrence, I'm not sure he's the guy that you want playing 90% or more of the snaps every single week. So we'll see if some of these younger guys like DJ Davidson, Jordan Riley, Ryder Anderson, some of these other guys that they have, Jordan Phillips, some of these other guys that they have on the defensive line, we'll see if they step forward and develop. And the number one guy, the number one most important guy, Andrew Thomas. All right, we all saw what happened last year when Andrew Thomas couldn't play because of the hamstring injury. Do I really need to explain this one to you? Do I need to justify that Andrew Thomas is like irreplaceable? The Giants will audition guys for swing tackle role. Will it be Matt Nelson? Will it be Jermaine Illuminor? Depending on, how things shake out. I don't know how it's going to shake out, but I can tell you this right now. I don't know that they have somebody as heady as Andrew Thomas on the roster. So Andrew Thomas, to me, is the top most important Giant and, of course, a cornerstone in this roster. All right, coming up next, how can the Giants unlock Daniel Jones's potential? This is something I think they should have been doing all along. They haven't. I think they're going to change it. I'll tell you what it is right after this. Hey, Giant fans. So, with the dead period coming up in the NFL calendar, I'm really looking forward to catching some shows and concerts in my local area. And no matter what I end up choosing, I never have to worry about being shut out thanks to GameTime. With GameTime, there are always great seats available at competitive prices. GameTime offers last-minute deals that can save you even more, and they take away the guesswork that comes with the buying experience. GameTime offers clear seat views and event cancellation protection. Plus, if you find tickets elsewhere in the same section and row for less, GameTime will give you 110% of the difference. So go on and take the guesswork out of buying tickets with GameTime. Download the GameTime app, create an account, and use the promo code LOCKEDONNFL for $20 off your first purchase. Last minute tickets, lowest prices guaranteed. Terms apply. All right, everybody, welcome back to the Locked On Giants podcast. I'm your host, Patricia Traina. And coming up this week on the Locked On Giants podcast, OTA number 3. The media will be in the building for OTA number 3. That is on Thursday. And I will have for you a full report on that, observations, what was said during the interview process, the interviews, all the kinds of good stuff. So make sure that you're also following me on not just X at Patricia_Traina, Traina, but also on Instagram at Patty Traina, PATTITRAINA, because I usually post video clips and whatnot, as well as pictures, more so on the Instagram account than I do really on the Twitter account. So anyway, in this segment, what is the secret sauce to unlocking Daniel Jones's potential? Now, before I get into that, I can't remember any player causing this much of a divide amongst the fan base. I mean, Eli Manning did in the latter part of his years, but, Eli, of course, had, quote unquote street cred, having won the 2 Super Bowls. Daniel Jones, on the other hand, one really good season, has kind of been, a victim of circumstances in a way, in that, different systems every other year, different head coach, different offensive coordinator, different play caller, hasn't had a good offensive line, hasn't really had good receivers. You name it, there's probably an excuse for Daniel Jones's struggles. So in thinking about this, I was like, okay, what can the Giants do to really help Daniel Jones get back to being the quarterback he was in 2022? Which I know some of you are going to say that he wasn't, that great in 2022, but he was functional and he won. So, what can they do to get him back to that level and then help him rise? For me, it's very simple. And it starts with Brian Dable. Now, here's what I'm kind of, interested in, and one of these days I'll ask about it and see if maybe we can get the right story. But to me, I remember when Brian Dable was hired as head coach, he spoke about how he had Daniel Jones over to his house and how they sat at a table, patio table, and they were talking about plays that Daniel liked and didn't like, and what did he want the offense to look like. And Brian Dable also, told the story about how they tailored the offense to Daniel Jones's strengths, what he did well and what he didn't do well. All right. So what happens? Coach worked with him on that. I don't know how involved Mike Kafka was in that, but I didn't get the impression initially, in any way, that Kafka was involved in that initial overview. Kafka came in and maybe came up with some ideas afterwards to kind of work off of what Daniel's feedback was. But I think if the Giants are going to get the most out of Daniel Jones, they've got to go back to, or they've got to let Brian Dable call the plays. I am just surprised that, they really haven't thought of that. And, that's not a diss against Mike Kafka. So, I think back to how Dable spoke about developing this system for Daniel Jones with Daniel's input, and only to pass it off to Kafka to do the actual play calling. So here you have, last year was struggles. The play calling was a little inconsistent. I think we can all agree on that. We could also agree on, the offensive line being a problem. How much of that was a result of talent or coaching or the blocking schemes? That's, up for debate. But Brian Dable, in my opinion, needs to call the plays this year. All right. If they're going to salvage Daniel Jones, Dable needs to call the plays. We talk about how Brian Dable is a quarterback whisperer, and you go back and you look at how he developed Josh Allen and how people have the expectation that Dable can work the same miracles, if you will, with Daniel Jones as he did with Josh Allen. Well, when he was with Josh Allen up in Buffalo, Dable was calling the plays. He was attached to Josh Allen's hip. Big difference. Here in New York, Dable hasn't done that. Not because, he's avoided it, but as head coach, getting his feet wet, getting himself situated, it's like, okay, delegated to Mike Kafka, former quarterback, who is not a bad play caller. Kafka did do a good job, I thought, in 2022. But last year, when things kind of fell apart, maybe Kafka's lack of experience in the area kind of, hurt them in some way, shape, or form. So I think if the Giants really want to get the most out of Daniel Jones, and look, they're going to run it back with him. They've already said it, whether we like it or not, that is going to be the case. You let Brian Dable call the plays. I do think that that's what's going to happen. I think that Dable will take over the play calling. Mike Kafka, as I've mentioned before, promoted to assistant head coach, will probably have some different responsibilities on game day. But if the Giants want to salvage Daniel Jones, this has to happen. Don't pass it off to Kafka or to Shea Tierney or whoever. Let Dable get Daniel Jones back on track and see if that doesn't solve the problem that they've been having with him as the quarterback. All right, coming up next, what's success going to look like for the New York Giants in 2024? I've got 5 criteria, other than, of course, wins and losses. And I'll tell you all about them right after this. Hey, Giant fans, it's winner take all time in the NBA and NHL, and FanDuel is giving you a shot to bring home a big win of your own. If you're like me and you like the New York Rangers odds as they pursue the Stanley Cup Finals, you'll want to be part of the action. Right now, when you sign up for an account with FanDuel, you will get $150 in bonus bets with any winning $5 bet. That's $150 to bet on spreads, money lines, player props, and more. Visit FanDuel.com/lockedon today and make every playoff shot count. FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook. All right, everybody, welcome back to the Locked On Giants podcast. I'm your host, Patricia Traina, and I get this question a lot from my listeners as well as my readers. What do the Giants have to do to show success in 2024? Now, right off the bat, I know this is going to sound negative, but I do not think the Giants are a Super Bowl contender just yet. I think they've got a ways to go. But there are 5 criteria that I've identified that I think if the Giants can accomplish this, will show that they are definitely on the right track. All right. Now, some of these are to chance, but I'm going to mention them anyhow. Number 1, fewer injuries. We all know the story, guys. The Giants have been either the league leader or amongst the league leaders in injuries every single year. That's got to stop. That is not a category you want to be up in the top 5 every single year. Now, that remains to be seen if that will change. You know, I do realize to an extent that injuries are part luck. You know, the game is violent. You know, broken bones will happen, but I'd like to see fewer soft tissue injuries, hamstrings, groins, and that sort of thing. So hopefully that'll be something that the Giants can reverse that trend. Item number 2, I want to see by the end of the year, the young players that they have on this team heavily contributing. Now, some of these players will maybe be gradually worked in, and I'm not talking draft picks, folks. I'm talking, like second-year players, third-year players who maybe haven't played a lot of snaps. I want to see them start to contribute a lot more. Because look, one of the things the Giants have struggled with in their drafting is they don't really come up with enough solid backups, if you will. Guys that can step in if they need to start. Guys that could be part of sub packages, whether it be on offense or defense. They need to get these players developed and to the point where they are contributing more so than maybe what we've seen in recent years. So that's a criteria for me. Number 3, I want to see the Giants when they win games. I want to see them outscore their opponents by more than 1 score. Last year, the Giants won 6 games. They only outscored the opponent by more than 1 score in 2 of those games. All right. I'm not talking necessarily about a 40-0 beatdown, but too many of these games are too close. They're just, there needs to be, in my opinion, I want to see a little bit more, progress in terms of scoring, in terms of holding opponents quiet. I just think these games, these close games are just, they're gut wrenchers. They really are. And if they lose them, they hurt even more. So I'd like to see the Giants start getting guys and, grabbing them by the jugular, so to speak. I mean, that was a staple of the teams, years ago when they were winning back in, the 1980s, back, 2007, 2011. I want to see more of that for the Giants. I think if they start taking commanding leads and beating their opponents convincingly, people will really start to take them seriously. All right. Item number 4, a winning division record. Now, in the first year of Brian Dable's tenure, they went 1-4-1. Last year, they were 3-3. So that gives them a 2-year total in the division of 4-7-1 with Brian Dable as the head coach. I've said this many, many times, folks. If you want to get to the playoffs, the easiest way is to win your division. The Giants have not done that. All right. They need to get back to doing that. Now, I'm not saying, it would be great if they could sweep the division, but I'd like to see them, continue to split with the Eagles. I'd like to see them, if at very minimum, split with Dallas and sweep Washington. Now, if somewhere along the line, they can figure out a way to maybe sweep the Cowboys, great, or sweep the Eagles, even better. But the division record, it all starts in your division. And the Giants, for whatever the reason, have struggled and suffered some of their worst losses against division opponents. That's got to stop, plain and simple. All right. And then item number 5, this is obvious. Daniel Jones needs to step up. All right. Now, he's got a better offensive line, supposedly. He's got a better receiving core, supposedly. The running game is not that bad, despite the loss of Saquon Barkley. Like I said, if Brian Dable takes over the play calling, which I believe he's going to, that's a feather in his cap. They're doing, they're building around Daniel Jones. They're hopefully putting everything in place so that he could be successful. And we need to see that gunslinger again. Last year, Daniel was reluctant to throw the ball, deep down the field. He seemed unsure of himself. We got to get back to him being more sure of himself, taking those chances, not being afraid. And it's interesting. I go back to when Joe Judge was here and how Judge kind of pounded into Daniel's head, don't make a mistake. Don't take a chance if it means you're going to, if you're not sure. Dable has tried to be the opposite. He's like, okay, you know what? Let's air it out and let's see what happens, in practice. If it doesn't work, it's practice. It's not going to hurt us. How you practice is how you generally play. And I think, with when Joe Judge was here, him constantly, pounding into Daniel's head, don't make a mistake, caused him to be a little bit tentative at times. When Dable got here, he tried to reverse that by saying, just air it out. We'll fix any mistakes, obviously, in practice. And we saw, obviously some signs of him playing better in 2022. 2023, again, you can point to the offensive line. You can point to any number of things, the lack of not trusting what he was seeing post snap. But these are all things that they need to get back to. You can't say, okay, don't be afraid to make a mistake in practice. And now you get to the game and Daniel, don't make a mistake because if you do, it's going to cost us. So I think they have to be a little bit more consistent with him. And if they can do that, I hope the Giants will have a little bit better results as, in 2024. So that being said, those are my 5 criteria for progress. Obviously, wins and losses are another one. You want more wins, 9-8 if you can, or 10-7. It would be even better. I think that's maybe a little too aggressive, but you never know. That's why you line up, and that's why you play the game. All right, Giant fans, that's going to do it for us on today's Locked On Giants podcast. As always, thank you for tuning in, spending part of your day with us here on the Locked On Giants podcast. Make sure you keep it here all week long. We have much more, including, don't forget, we will have the OTA number 3 wrap up. I will record that show just as soon as I possibly can once I get back to my home studio to give you all the latest on what went down during that practice. So until then, have a great one, everybody, and I will see you again tomorrow.